Hello. I'm hoping this is working. I'm trying something new today. I'm calling it Caffeinated Change, and I want to be doing a weekly episode of answering your culture building questions. This is going to be maybe a little cheesy, maybe it'll flop. I'm not sure yet how this is going to go, but the last couple of lives that I've done, the conversations have been fantastic. The questions have been just challenging and wonderful. And I really wanted to play off of that energy and meet you again here today. I am having my coffee first thing in the morning, coming on LinkedIn, doing this live. That's why it's called Caffeinated Change. And I want these episodes in this series to be, yes, about tackling your questions for sure. I wrote up a little blurb about it. So what I wrote actually in this initial post that I put up about a week ago asking people for questions was, what do you want to know about culture change? All questions welcome, all prompts welcome, all challenges. If you want me to tackle a specific case or situation, I'll go there. I'm going to be doing weekly lives to tackle your culture building challenges and opportunities. The regular questions I receive, the apprehensions and the breakthroughs. I want to address topics you actually want to learn about. And then last night, very late, I was thinking about what to actually call this thing. And I thought about change-a-chino, because I have cappuccinos in the morning. That's very cheesy. I thought change espresso, because it's nice and quick. And I'm only going to be doing 10 minutes or so, 20 minutes. Change olay. They're all super bad, I know. So caffeinated change, ultimately what I kind of landed on last night very late, and this might change, is express answers to big culture questions, getting to the heart of organizational change while I have my morning coffee. I want to start today, not by answering the question. I do have a question that I will be answering today, but I want to start today by addressing, first of all, by acknowledging and recognizing the land that I'm on. I live in Verdun. This is situated on unceded Indigenous lands, and I recognize the Ganyunk-Gahaga Nation as the guardians of these lands and waters that we are gathering on today digitally, but that I get to benefit from every single day. And I'm moved right now because I have so much respect for the Indigenous peoples of this country. I'm not going to take this moment to get into my upbringing, but I will mention quickly that I grew up in the subarctic, and I got to be invited into and experience First Nations customs and cultures. And it was a magical, exceptionally rich childhood. And to see how the Indigenous peoples of this country are treated on personal, in one-to-one interactions, in the stories that are told about them, in the systems that oppress them. It's devastating. And the news out of Kamloops this week was just horrific. And I've always had this really ignited spirit around change. I do the work that I do because in large part, I'm looking for hope. I'm looking for a way to make actionable my values and beliefs in environments where I often feel that my values and beliefs of respect, inclusivity, equity, where those values and beliefs are not necessarily upheld. One thing that I learned from the Indigenous people in my youth that I got to interact with, my friends, people that were my teachers, was that everything is connected. All of our systems are connected. All of us are connected as people, and we're connected to this land. And as especially as non-Indigenous people, as settlers, it's our responsibility to take actions in our daily lives that decolonize this environment and that decolonize ourselves. So I wanted to start with that because I think it's important for us, even though we're seeing these massive, we're seeing these really devastating demonstrations of colonization, not just in Canada, but it's important for us to recognize that although those situations are very large, and oh, there's someone here with me. Hi, Jonathan. Although these systems feel extremely large, we actually have impact in our daily lives. That's what my work is about. My work doing culture building in organizations is about helping leaders and individuals to recognize that they have the potential to create change around them in small ways, but then the small impacts the big. So I wanted to share just a couple of resources that were just fantastic for me. This week, I woke up to a newsletter from Feminuity, which is a consulting firm out of Toronto that supports diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations. And Feminuity's newsletter asked a very, very simple question, had a very simple model to help us to think about how we can begin walking towards change, begin walking towards the decolonization that we want to see. And so what they wrote in this newsletter was a great way to determine if your commitments shift past performative gestures beyond words of empathy and flag lowering is to input your obligations into this template. The template is, as a blank settler, this week I can work in solidarity with Indigenous peoples by blank. And one thing that you can do this week and this month is to learn specifically to listen and to listen to stories of Indigenous people, to humanize this situation for yourself. There's a fantastic podcast that was just released by CBC Podcast, which is called Telling Our Twisted Histories. I'll share some links because I highly recommend that you sign up for Feminuity's newsletter. So many amazing resources that support you in creating more inclusive, more equitable work environments. I constantly learn from the Feminuity team. And then Telling Our Twisted Histories, this podcast, it's about the words that we use and the words that we continue to use that subconsciously are connected to stories around Indigenous peoples. And this podcast helps us to really look at those words, interrogate them, and to contemplate what they mean. Specifically, they look at these words through First Nations and Indigenous perspectives and stories. And I highly recommend it. So, yeah. I haven't even had a sip of my coffee yet. So caffeinated change, okay? These small changes that we make in our one-to-one relationships, in our one-to-a-few relationships, in our one-to-many relationships in our organizations, in our families, with our friends, they have impact far beyond those moments. This is true in culture building in organizations, that we need to recognize the impact and the influence of each of our words and our actions and our behaviors. This is true not just for people in positions of leadership. This is also true for everyone, no matter what level you are at, what title you have. And I want you to keep that in mind as I answer these questions, because it's really about the possibility and the potential if all of us take responsibility and accountability for ourselves. If we take ownership for the culture that we build around us, what could happen? What could happen if we showed up to connections at work more human, more values driven, more vocally opinionated, as long as we feel safe to do so? What could happen is that we could invite more connection from the person in front of us, more humanity from them, their values, their beliefs. And then in that connection, in that honest connection, what we are doing is we are creating an environment of trust and of safety. And this is how collaboration happens, but it's also how creativity is unlocked, how innovation can happen, and how we can build solutions that will shift the systems that we work and live in. And I'm talking about the big systems, the big oppressive systems that we are up against, that stifle us creatively, that stifle our humanity, that oppress some while upholding others. We have impact on that. Okay, so I'm going to read the question that I got. And for anybody watching this in replay, if you have a question you'd like me to tackle next week, a topic, if you want to know what I've been reading about or working on, if you have a specific challenge at work that you want me to address, I can keep it. I can keep it anonymous. I'd be happy to. Jonathan, I recently experienced the phenomena of endowment in a cultural fit crise. I would love to hear more. Could you explain a little more in the comments? And while you type that up, I'm going to read. Come on, camera, get with me. Yeah, so Jonathan says, when you try to change a culture, there's also forces at work that attempt to preserve it, that attempt to preserve the culture for the people that it works for. Of course, there are always opposing forces in moments of change. Absolutely. Endowment equals loss aversion. Wow, these words are too big for this phase of Caffeinated, apparently. You invest time, and as time goes by, no change is possible. Oh boy, that sounds frustrating. But you stay on the problem. Did you stay in the environment is one of the questions that I want to be asking. Thank you, Jonathan, for the engagement. I want to talk to you about this more, and maybe this will be a topic that I'll tackle next week, because it's a big one. It's like, what do you do if the system's not working with you, if it's not moving? Generally, what I tell people, and I know this is kind of a simplistic answer, but without more information, this is the information, this is the insight that I have to give. If you're in an environment that is immovable, you feel it is immovable, what you can contemplate is the fact that you have a microculture around you that you do impact. That is a truth. No one can take that from you. You create environments in the relationships that you build around you. So in a situation where you feel things are immovable, contemplate your own influence and where you can make movement happen. And that can be in building trust with specific individuals and helping them feel supported, in giving them an open ear, and being the pillar of support that they need. It can also be in being more vocal about your beliefs. It can be in writing about your experience and talking about it with people who are not in that environment, because that will have an impact too. It can also be in leaving the environment, unfortunately. Sorry to hear your role was abolished, Jonathan. But maybe that's for the better, because you're an amazing creative spirit with vision, and the world needs you in places that are ready for change. And there are more and more places that are ready for change. So the question that I received last week from Eric Bolduc, who's been just like so amazing in my comments. Thank you so much for engaging, participating. Eric said, when you yourself and your colleagues, your organization are overwhelmed by much/constant change, how do you make culture change sexy for yourself and for your peers? How do you make it something that you actually want to do if you're being bombarded by change always? Okay, so I told myself that I wouldn't read these questions too much beforehand because I don't want to be overthinking it, and I really want to be going off the cuff. the first thing to recognize, and for everybody in that environment to recognize, is that change is constant, whether we acknowledge it or not. The change is happening. Even in systems that feel immovable, change is happening because change is happening internally in all of us. So it might feel like you're in a moment of overwhelm with much and constant change, but in reality, change is always happening. It just is always happening. It just feels as though right now there's a lot going on. What I would say in order to kind of get everybody back on the same page is that you need to slow your pace and acknowledge where you're at. You need to become more contextually aware as a group. Take a pause and go into a reflective sort of mode, all of you, and consider, what about this has been overwhelming? What about this has been exciting? What about this do we want to learn more about and from? There, in these moments of overwhelm, there's so many insights that all of you can gather, and it can also be a great moment when you pause and acknowledge what everyone is going through to bond as a team. We need to create, when we're in periods of change culturally, we need to create phases. We need to go with cycles of change. You can't constantly be in action. You can't constantly be in overwhelm. So we need to respect the fact that there's going to be slower, more reflective periods where we gather insights, where we align as a team and make decisions. And then there are going to be more strategic action phases where we're really putting the wheels in motion for change. What I would say, just to sum it up, is take pause together, acknowledge what you are learning, identify what is working, identify what is not working, and recognize that culture change is always happening, and it happens in really small practices, small human moments, micro actions and micro interactions, not in these big, heavy decisions of like, okay, now we're doing it, we're making change happen. That's not how it happens. It's happening in every single conversation that you're having. So get aware and conscious of the practices that are working, the practices that you want to be committing to as a group. Collectively slow down, get transparent about what you're going through. And change is uncomfortable, so it's not going to be sexy all the time. That's for sure. But I think you make it more appealing by giving people an opportunity to find their bearings and to feel heard. All right. Priya, reflective periods where we gather insights, later action to come up, pause, acknowledge, identify what works and not, recognize the culture changes in micro actions, beautiful insights. Oh, thank you. I thought I was reading your words, but I really appreciate that. So there is no rush with change ever. On a personal level, we are not being, we really have to slow the rushing down, and in organizations, there is no rush to change. We need to go with the flow that we are all moving at. All right. I really enjoyed this, and I will do it again. I got to go because I got a call in 1 minute. I've barely touched my coffee, so maybe this isn't so much caffeinated change as I want my caffeination change. So, je vous aime. I really appreciate you tuning in. Write me, ask me questions, get in the comments. What challenge do you want me to address? Take care of yourselves and start where you are with you. You're building a microculture in every single conversation that you're having. Thanks, Jonathan and Priya. Jonathan, let's absolutely talk soon. Bon matin. Bonne journée. Yay, Francis, so good to see you. Okay, cool. I'll see you all next week.